The late-night hours are often marked by a distinct, almost magnetic shift in our emotional landscape. As the clock ticks past midnight and the world settles into silence, conversations take on a deeper resonance. We find ourselves saying things we would never utter in the clarity of the morning sun, confessions, unfiltered opinions, and truths about our deepest anxieties. This phenomenon is not merely a trope of late-night talk. It is a profound psychological reality rooted in the biology of executive function and cognitive fatigue. The late-night confession is a direct consequence of the prefrontal cortex, the brain's center for reasoning, planning, and impulse control, finally succumbing to exhaustion. Throughout the day, the prefrontal cortex, PFC, works tirelessly to maintain what social psychology terms our social filter. This filter is a complex, energy-intensive process involving inhibitory control, suppressing inappropriate comments, managing nonverbal cues, and carefully framing our opinions to maintain social harmony or professional decorum. This control, however, is a finite resource, as the day's cognitive demands accumulate, from complex problem-solving to emotional regulation in stressful meetings. The glucose stores required by the PFC become depleted. This state of cognitive depletion, often referred to as ego depletion, is what allows the nighttime confessional to occur. When the PFC's control falters, a state of disinhibition takes over, the effortful process of editing our thoughts ceases, and the pathway from thought to spoken word becomes startlingly direct. We often call this being tired and emotional, but the underlying mechanism is a simplified cognitive process. The brain defaults to its more primal, automatic processing centers. This means that late-night communication often bypasses the careful layers of self-monitoring and social strategy that dominate daytime interactions. Research into deception and honesty consistently shows that maintaining a lie or managing a complex social facade requires intense cognitive effort. When that effort capacity is low, the path of least resistance is the truth. This psychological effect extends beyond simple honesty. It touches on creativity and problem-solving. Studies suggest that the tired brain is a less focused, but sometimes more open, brain. By relaxing the strict linear logic imposed by the fully alert PFC, the mind can wander more freely, making connections between disparate ideas a process essential for creative insight. The later-night thought, unburdened by the need for immediate practical application, allows for a fluid, associative style of thinking. However, this lack of vigilance also explains the poor judgment often associated with being tired. The ability to properly assess risk, delay gratification, or evaluate consequences is severely compromised. The truth is revealed not out of courage, but out of cognitive surrender. The phenomenon is also reinforced by the environment. The quiet, dark setting of the late night removes many of the external stimuli and social pressures that keep us guarded during the day. There is a psychological comfort in the silence and the perceived anonymity of the dark. which lowers our internal guard alongside the faltering cognitive guard. In essence, the late night creates a perfect storm of chemical fatigue and environmental calm, allowing our most direct and often most vulnerable selves to emerge. Understanding this natural cycle of cognitive fatigue can help us contextualize it and manage our most honest, yet sometimes reckless, later night impulses, recognizing them as an unedited transcript of our true mental state. This raw honesty is a feature, not a bug, of the human brain's exhaustion cycle, offering a brief, unfiltered window into the self. Multitasking, often hailed as the cornerstone of productivity in the modern world, is, in reality, one of the most significant impediments to effective memory encoding and reliable cognitive performance. The popular notion that the brain can seamlessly handle two or more demanding tasks simultaneously is a seductive myth. The true science reveals that when we attempt to multitask, we are, in fact, merely task switching rapidly. This rapid switching comes at a steep cognitive cost, directly impacting the quality and detail of the information we retain. The brain does not parallel process complex information. It bottlenecks it, creating cognitive interference. When a person tries to listen to a podcast while writing an important email, they are not devoting 100% of their attention to both. Instead, they are toggling between the two tasks. Every time the brain switches from processing auditory input to formulating linguistic output, it incurs a switch cost. This cost involves the time and energy required for the prefrontal cortex to disengage from the rules and goals of the previous task and load the rules and goals of the new task. This constant loading and unloading of mental resources creates significant cognitive load and fragments the focus applied to either task. As a result, the deep, effortful processing necessary for strong, lasting memory formation, a process called encoding specificities, severely compromised. Memory formation, particularly for factual or procedural knowledge, relies heavily on the hippocampus and requires concentrated, focused attention. When attention is fragmented, the hippocampus receives incomplete or shallowly processed data. The information is not fully integrated with existing knowledge networks, leading to what psychologists call source monitoring errors. We remember the fact but forget where we learned it, or we remember the task but miss crucial details. The resulting memory is fragile, unreliable, and prone to decay. Studies have shown that chronic multitaskers actually exhibit structural differences in their brains, particularly in areas associated with cognitive control, suggesting that this habit physically trains the brain to be less effective at deep focus. Furthermore, the act of task switching increases the production of the stress hormone cortisol, which paradoxically reduces the brain's ability to allocate resources effectively. The feeling of being busy and productive that accompanies multitasking is often a misinterpretation of this heightened, stress-induced state. We feel active and engaged because our brain is under continuous pressure, not because we are achieving high-quality output. The cumulative effect of this constant fragmentation is a reduction in working memory capacity. Working memory, the mental workbench where we temporarily hold and manipulate information, is essential for problem solving and comprehension. By demanding that working memory hold the context for multiple parallel tasks, multitasking quickly overwhelms its limited capacity. To counteract the negative effects of the multitasking myth, psychologists and neuroscientists advocate for monotasking or deep work. Techniques such as time blocking and the Pomodoro technique are designed to intentionally reduce the cognitive switch cost by dedicating uninterrupted blocks of time to a single task, by giving a task focused, sustained attention. The brain can successfully encode the information, leading to reliable long-term memory formation and higher quality results. The science is clear. To be truly effective, one must prioritize depth over breadth, acknowledging that attention is not infinitely divisible, but a valuable resource best used sequentially. The simple act of human touch is far more than a social gesture. It is a profound biological and psychological intervention with documented power to mitigate the experience of physical pain. The reason a comforting hand on the shoulder or a prolonged hug can lessen a sudden ache is rooted in a sophisticated neurochemical cascade that leverages the body's own analgesic system. Touch acts as a powerful counterstimulus and a trigger for deep-seated emotional safety, effectively turning down the volume on pain signals sent to the brain. When pain occurs, specialized sensory neurons, called nociceptors, transmit signals rapidly up the spinal cord to the brain's pain matrix-an integrated network, including the somatosensory cortex, the insular, and the anterior cingulate cortex. However, the presence of comforting touch initiates a simultaneous competing signal. This aligns with the gate control theory of pain, which posits that non-painful input can close the gates to painful input, preventing it from reaching the central nervous system. The sensation of gentle, warm touch travels along different sensory pathways, specifically through slow-conducting C-tactile afferents (CT) fibers, which are optimized for processing pleasant touch. This non-painful input effectively floods the system, overriding the more distressing nociceptive signals. Crucially, comforting touch triggers the immediate release of oxytocin, often dubbed the love hormone or the bonding hormone, produced in the hypothalamus and released by the pituitary gland. Oxytocin plays a central role in social attachment, trust, and stress reduction. When released into the bloodstream and the brain, oxytocin acts directly on the amygdala, reducing the activity of this fear and stress center. Since pain perception is dramatically amplified by fear, anxiety, and stress, the oxytocin surge induced by touch chemically diminishes the psychological component of the pain experience. The brain interprets the touch as a sign of social support and safety, signaling that the threat level is low, thereby chemically modulating the pain response. Furthermore, touch can trigger the brain's natural opioid system, Studies have shown that physical contact can cause the release of endorphins, the body's internal painkillers. These endogenous opioids bind to the same receptors as pharmaceutical narcotics, blocking pain signals and producing feelings of well-being. This neurobiological response demonstrates that the analgesic effect of touch is measurable and profound. In clinical settings, the application of therapeutic touch, whether from a caregiver or a loved one, is known to lower heart rate, reduce blood pressure, and ease the tension that often exacerbates pain conditions. The efficacy of touch is also dependent on context and synchronicity. When a touch is delivered in a way that suggests empathy or shared experience, such as hand-holding, between romantic partners, brain imaging shows increased synchronization in their brainwaves, particularly in areas associated with attention and empathy. This neural synchrony enhances the analgesic effect, suggesting that the feeling of being truly understood and supported is integral to the pain-reducing power of physical connection. Touch, therefore, is not a distraction from pain, but a deep, fundamental biological mechanism for signaling safety and shared resources, which ultimately diminishes the threat of physical suffering. The sense of smell or olfaction holds a unique and privileged position within the human nervous system, allowing it to exert an invisible yet profound influence over our subconscious decision-making, emotional state, and memory. Unlike all other sensory information, which must first travel through the thalamus, the brain's relay station, before reaching the cortex. Olfactory signals from the nose travel directly to the limbic system. This direct, unmediated pathway connects smell immediately to the brain regions responsible for emotion and memory specifically: the amygdala, emotion, and the hippocampus, memory. This unique neuroanatomical arrangement is the foundation for the famous Proust effect, or olfactory memory, a fleeting center-specific perfume, a type of wood smoke, or a long-forgotten cookie can instantly trigger an extraordinarily vivid, emotional, and detailed memory from decades past. These memories are often more emotionally charged and feel less consciously constructed than memories recalled through visual or auditory cues. Because the signal bypasses the conscious analytical filters of the thalamus and prefrontal cortex, the memory is retrieved in its raw emotional form, linking a past feeling directly to the present. The scent acts as a powerful, unfiltered portal to our personal history. Beyond memory, scent operates as a powerful form of subconscious priming in our daily lives. Odor molecules, or chemosignals, are constantly processed by the brain, subtly shaping our mood and behavior without our conscious awareness. For example, studies in marketing and social psychology have shown that specific ambient scents can dramatically alter behavior. The faint scent of citrus may increase perceived energy and attention, leading to better performance on cognitive tasks. The aroma of baked goods may subtly increase charitable behavior as it triggers associations with home and comfort. Conversely, less pleasant or aggressive scents can induce anxiety or alter risk assessment. highlighting the potent nonverbal communication carried by volatile organic compounds. The influence of scent also extends into social and physiological domains. Humans emit pheromones and other chemical signals that can communicate physiological states, such as fear or stress. To those nearby, a topic related to emotional contagion, discussed in a later chapter. Even non-specific ambient odors can affect emotional contagion. People exposed to a pleasant smell may rate the expressions of others as happier, demonstrating that the environment is chemically shaping emotional perception. This constant, subliminal chemical dialogue underscores the brain's reliance on olfactory data to build an instantaneous, non-analytical assessment of the environment. Understanding the deep primal power of olfaction provides a critical lens through which to view human experience. It shows that our immediate gut reactions, our deep nostalgic pulls, and even some of our subtle behavioral choices are continuously being guided by an invisible cloud of molecules. This invisible influence highlights the profound biological underpinnings of our most cherished emotions and memories, reminding us that we are constantly immersed in a chemical environment that shapes our psychological reality. The placebo effect stands as one of the most compelling demonstrations of the profound influence the mind exerts over the body's biology. It is not merely a psychological trick or wishful thinking. It is a measurable physiological changer mind-over-matter phenomenon that leverages the power of expectation to alter pain, regulate hormones, and even simulate physical rest. At its core, the placebo effect is the brain's response to the belief or expectation of benefit, demonstrating that the context and narrative surrounding a treatment can be as potent as the treatment itself. The neurological basis of the placebo effect lies in the activation of the body's own reward and pain systems. When an individual anticipates a positive outcome from a perceived treatment, even if it is biologically inert, like a sugar pill, the brain releases powerful neurotransmitters. In cases of pain relief, the expectation of efficacy triggers the release of endogenous opioids, endorphins, and enkephalins in areas like the periaqueductal gray pog. These natural painkillers bind to opioid receptors, effectively blocking pain signals before they reach the higher cortical centers, creating genuine, measurable analgesia. The feeling is real because the brain's chemistry has genuinely changed. This powerful interplay between expectation and physiology is vividly demonstrated by the phenomenon of placebo sleep. The research suggests that a person's belief about the quality of their sleep can override the actual physiological measures of sleep quality. If individuals are told they received deep, high-quality, slow-wave sleep, they perform significantly better on subsequent cognitive tests, such as memory tasks and attention checks, compared to individuals who were told they had poor quality sleep, regardless of the objective EEG data recorded during the night. The mere belief in having slept well primes the cognitive system for better performance. activating circuits related to alertness and optimism, and reducing perceived stress. Furthermore, the mechanism of the placebo effect is deeply intertwined with conditioned learning. Just as Pavlov's dogs were conditioned to salivate at the sound of a bell, humans can be conditioned to respond to the context of treatment. If a treatment has worked in the past, for example, a specific blue pill relieving headaches, the body learns to associate the cue, the blue pill, with the effect pain relief, even if the pill is later swapped for an inert substance. The context alone can trigger the conditioned biological response, the release of endorphins, or the reduction of inflammation as the body anticipates the relief. Perhaps the most startling recent finding is the discovery of the open-label placebo effect, which suggests that placebos can still work even when patients are fully aware they are receiving an inert substance. This implies that the mechanism is not solely dependent on conscious deception or blinding, but also on the deliberate, repeated act of taking the medicine and the therapeutic ritual it represents. The context, the caring interaction with a practitioner, and the hopeful intention all combine to switch on the brain's internal healing mechanisms. The power of expectation is thus recognized not as a flaw in science, but as a critical therapeutic pathway that harnesses the mind to modulate physiology. The human mind, in its relentless pursuit of order and completion, possesses a striking cognitive bias known as the Zeigarnik effect. This psychological phenomenon dictates that people are significantly more likely to remember tasks that have been interrupted or left incomplete compared to those that have been successfully finished. Far from being a mere quirk of memory, the Zeigarnik effect reveals a fundamental mechanism of the brain's attentional system, the persistent mental pressure exerted by an open cognitive loop. The effect is named after Russian psychologist Bluma Zeigarnik, who first observed the pattern in the 1920s while watching waiters in a busy cafe. She noticed that the waiters could flawlessly recall the complex, specific orders of tables that were still eating, but instantly forgot those details once the bill was paid and the task was complete. Her subsequent laboratory research confirmed this observation. Subjects recalled unfinished tasks nearly twice as often as completed ones. The underlying psychological explanation is that an incomplete task generates a specific, measurable state of psychic tension within the cognitive system. When we initiate a goal-directed activity, the brain creates a corresponding cognitive structure or intention, which generates tension to ensure the task is executed. This tension acts as a mental alarm, continually prompting the attention system until the objective is met. Only upon successful completion does the brain consciously file the task away, thereby releasing the associated tension and freeing up mental resources. Tasks that are interrupted or left on a mental to-do shelf, however, maintain this elevated state of tension. They keep the cognitive loop open, ensuring the material remains highly accessible to working memory. While this mechanism is useful for survival, preventing us from forgetting crucial steps in a sequence, it becomes a significant source of cognitive clutter and stress in modern life. This persistent mental pressure from open loops contributes to feelings of overwhelm and anxiety. The mental energy expended on simply remembering the list of unfinished items detracts from the energy available for deep focus on the current task. This effect is closely related to the concept of intrusion, where unwanted thoughts or reminders break into conscious awareness. The Zeigarnik effect essentially makes the brain a poor filing system for later tasks, constantly bringing them to the forefront, demanding attention, and thus contributing to the sensation that one is always running behind. Fortunately, the Zeigarnik effect can be strategically managed. The key is not necessarily to finish the task, but to satisfy the brain's intention to plan the task. Techniques like the Getting Things Done (GTD) methodology leverage this by taking an incomplete task and immediately formalizing the next step, writing it down, and scheduling it. One effectively offloads the cognitive load from the working memory to an external, trusted system, a planner, a calendar. This act of externalizing the intention closes the cognitive loop temporarily in the brain's view, reducing the psychic tension and freeing up mental space for the task at hand. Therefore, managing the Zeigarnik effect transforms it from a source of stress into a powerful tool for prioritizing and streamlining mental focus. Gossip, often dismissed as trivial or malicious chit-chat, is in fact a deeply ingrained evolutionary mechanism that reveals critical insights into human memory and social intelligence. The brain's tendency to remember social information, stories about the behavior, relationships, and reputations of others far better than neutral factual data is not accidental. It is a feature designed to navigate the complexities of group living. Gossip, in this context, serves as a vital currency for social bonding, trust management, and group cohesion, making it an indispensable tool for survival and resource allocation in our ancestral past. From an evolutionary standpoint, the most critical information for an early human was not the exact calorie count of a root vegetable, but rather who could be trusted, who was a reliable hunter, and who was violating the established social norms. The human brain, therefore, evolved a specialized network for processing social information. This network, including the temporal parietal junction (TPJ) and the medial prefrontal cortex (MPFC), is heavily involved in theory of mind, the ability to attribute mental states, beliefs, intentions, desires to oneself and others. When we engage in gossip, we are actively running simulations of social scenarios, practicing our theory of mind, and reinforcing these critical neural circuits. The information exchanged in gossip is often highly emotional, complex, and narrative-driven factors that dramatically enhance memory retention. Emotional content acts as a powerful mnemonic device, ensuring that the details of a transgression or a triumph are deeply encoded. The narrative structure provides context, linking actions to motives, which makes the information far more meaningful and memorable than dry, isolated facts. Furthermore, gossip often involves the calculation of risk and reward. Will associating with this person be beneficial or harmful? Will sharing this information increase my status or alienate me from the group? The brain treats this calculation as high-stakes data, guaranteeing its efficient storage. Social psychologists recognize gossip as a form of social grooming, a method of maintaining ties and establishing boundaries within a group. Sharing exclusive information creates a temporary bond and fosters trust between the speaker and the listener. It is a subtle way of declaring we are an in-group and we share privileged knowledge. Conversely, it is a mechanism for enforcing social norms. When an individual's behavior is discussed, the group is collectively affirming what is acceptable and what is not, ensuring that freeloaders or rule breakers are identified and potentially ostracized, which is crucial for resource stability. Therefore, while gossip can certainly be malicious, its persistence in human culture highlights its fundamental cognitive importance. The fact that the brain dedicates such superior processing and memory resources to social information confirms the social brain hypothesis, which posits that the complexity of our social lives was the primary driver for the evolution of our large, complex brains. We are hardwired to be attentive to the social drama of others because, historically, our survival depended on a refined understanding of the political and relational landscape of our group. Our subjective experience of time is fluid, elastic, and often wildly inconsistent, a fact that stands in stark contrast to the steady, clockwork precision of physical time. The perceived stretching and collapsing of time, the phenomenon where a moment of danger feels infinitely long. Yet an entire year of routine passes in a blurs, not an illusion, but a genuine feature of how the brain processes and codes experiences based on dopamine release, novelty, and threat detection. When we are exposed to a novel, unexpected, or threatening event, the brain's sensory and emotional centers, including the amygdala and the hippocampus, go into overdrive. In a moment of panic or intense focus, the neural network rapidly increases the density of information processing. It feels as if the brain is recording an enormous number of frames per second, encoding every micro detail: the lighting, the sounds, the specific spatial configuration, and an attempt to analyze and respond to the threat. When the memory of this event is later retrieved, the sheer volume of stored data creates the subjective impression that the event lasted much longer than it did. The perception of time is intrinsically linked to the amount of information the brain has encoded during that period. Conversely, when we are engaged in a predictable routine or a highly familiar, low-stakes activity, the brain requires minimal processing power. It can afford to be cognitively lazy, encoding only a handful of key details. This state is often associated with the sensation of time passing quickly. The repetitive nature of daily life, the same commute, the same desk, the same actions means the brain does not allocate the energy required for detailed encoding. When we later recall a week or a month of routine, the paucity of unique memories means there is very little data to retrieve, giving the impression that the period collapsed into a single, brief duration. This is why childhood, filled with novelty and first-time experiences, often seems to have lasted longer than an adult decade saturated with routine. The neurochemical basis for this variability involves dopamine, the key neurotransmitter associated with reward, motivation, and attention. Novelty and excitement trigger a strong dopamine release, which is integral to the hippocampal activity required for robust memory formation. This dopamine surge essentially highlights the event, ensuring it is encoded with high priority. Routine tasks lacking this dopamine spike are consequently encoded weakly. This helps explain the vacation effect, where the initial days of travel, filled with new sights and sounds, feel long and memorable, while the final days, after the brain has adapted to the new environment, speed by it. Furthermore, the state of flow, where attention is fully immersed in an activity, causes the perception of time to accelerate dramatically. During flow, the brain's focus is so intense that self-awareness and the processing of external time cues are temporarily diminished. Understanding the elasticity of time perception allows us to consciously seek out novelty and engagement, recognizing that the richness of our memories is the measure of time, not the ticking of a clock. The brain, in its constant effort to construct a coherent and navigable reality, is a masterful deceiver. This capacity for self-deception manifests most vividly in phenomena like déjà vu and the creation of vivid, convincing, fabricated memories, false memories. These moments of cognitive glitch underscore that memory is not a fixed, immutable recording, but rather an active, dynamic construction, prone to errors in retrieval and susceptible to influence with every recollection. Déjà vu, the fleeting but powerful sensation of having previously experienced a current moment, is theorized to be a temporary glitch in the brain's recognition and familiarity systems. One leading hypothesis suggests it is a momentary breakdown in the temporal lobe, specifically a discontinuity between the recognition and recall pathways. The brain generates a strong sense of familiarity, the recognition component, without the corresponding context or detail of recall, the specific memory of the prior event. This can be caused by a minor neural misfire, perhaps a slightly delayed signal along the processing route, leading the brain to mislabel the present sensory input as having already occurred. The feeling is real, but the historical context is missing, creating the surreal temporal paradox. The concept of fabricated memory delves deeper into the constructed nature of our past. Every time a memory is retrieved, it enters a volatile state known as reconsolidation. In this state, the memory is temporarily susceptible to modification, much like a saved digital file opened for editing. New information, suggestion, emotion, or even the act of retrieving the memory in a different context can subtly alter the original narrative before it is resaved. Over time, these small edits can accumulate, leading to memories that feel intensely real but are partially or wholly untrue. The original fact and the later suggestion become indistinguishably interwoven. A key contributor to fabricated memories is source monitoring error, where an individual remembers the information, the content of the memory, but forgets the source of that information. For example, a person might hear a detailed story about an event they attended, forget that they only heard the story, and later vividly recall the event as having experienced it themselves. The brain's confidence in the memory is tied to the vividness and emotional resonance of the content, not to its original veracity. Furthermore, fabricated memories are often formed in response to suggestion. The famous work on the misinformation effect shows that simply asking leading questions or providing slightly inaccurate post-event information can integrate false details into a witness's memory. The brain accepts the new information not because it is accurate, but because it neatly fills a gap in the original, often incomplete, memory trace. The critical takeaway from these phenomena is that memory serves a functional purpose to help us navigate the future and is often sacrificed for coherence over complete objective accuracy. The sensation of self-deception in the form of déjà vu or a false memory is simply the occasional, fleeting exposure of the editing process underlying our perceived reality. The seemingly intangible psychological states of gratitude and optimism hold demonstrable, measurable power over human physiology, acting as natural regulators for the body's stress chemistry. Far from being mere feel-good sentiments, these states actively modulate the neuroendocrine system, leading to reduced stress hormones, improved immune function, and better cardiovascular health. The consistent practice of recognizing and expressing thanks, coupled with a belief in positive future outcomes, essentially tunes the body toward a state of resilience and healing. The central mechanism linking gratitude and well-being is the regulation of the hypothalamic pituitary-adrenal HPA axis, the body's primary stress response system. When a person feels gratitude or engages in optimistic thinking, the activity of the HPA axis is dampened, leading to a significant decrease in the production and circulation of the stress hormone cortisol. High chronic levels of cortisol are linked to inflammation, weight gain, impaired cognitive function, and cardiovascular damage. By reducing this chemical burden, gratitude acts as a powerful preventative health measure, lowering blood pressure and easing the strain on the heart. The positive feedback loop is further reinforced by the vagus nerve, a major pathway connecting the brain to many vital organs, including the heart, lungs, and gut. The vagus nerve plays a crucial role in the parasympathetic nervous system, the rest and digest system. Studies have shown that practicing gratitude increases vagal tone, making the vagus nerve more active and responsive. Improved vagal tone translates directly to a quicker return to a state of calm after a stressor, a lower resting heart rate, and an overall enhancement of the body's ability to self-regulate and recover. The feeling of being thankful is, therefore, physically relaxing. Optimism, the general expectation that good things will happen, also translates into biological resilience. Individuals who maintain a positive outlook often adopt healthier behaviors, such as exercising and eating well, knowing that their efforts will yield positive long-term results. More directly, optimism has been shown to boost immune function. Hopeful. Positive expectations can lead to increased activity in the body's natural killer cells, NK cells, which are crucial for fighting off viral infections and cancer. The belief in a successful outcome can literally prepare the body for victory over illness. Furthermore, both gratitude and optimism stimulate the brain's reward centers, promoting the release of dopamine and serotonin. These neurotransmitters are essential for mood regulation, motivation, and the creation of positive emotional states. The regular practice of gratitude, such as keeping a gratitude journal, trains the brain to actively search for and prioritize the positive aspects of life, reinforcing these beneficial neural pathways. In essence, gratitude and optimism are not passive personality traits. They are active, cognitive practices that chemically condition the body for reduced inflammation, enhanced recovery, and increased longevity, making them a cornerstone of preventative mental and physical health. Music possesses an extraordinary power to excavate deep, emotionally resonant memories from the past, acting as a direct and often unfiltered time machine. The reason a familiar melody can instantly transport an individual back decades to a specific moment, feeling, or setting lies in the uniquely distributed way the brain processes music, engaging vast, interconnected networks that link auditory processing directly with the centers of emotion, reward, and long-term memory. Unlike speech or visual stimuli, music processing is not confined to a single area. It is a whole brain phenomenon. When we hear music, the sound is first processed by the auditory cortex, but almost immediately, the signal cascades through multiple areas: the motor cortex for beat and rhythm, the prefrontal cortex for musical structure and expectation, and most importantly, the limbic system, which includes the amygdala emotion and the hippocampus memory. The co-activation of these centers ensures that a musical piece is not just heard, but is intimately tagged with an emotional state and anchored deeply within autobiographical memory. The strong emotional tagging of musical memories is key to their longevity and vividness. Music often accompanies peak emotional experiences in our lives' first dances, major milestones, periods of heartbreak, or collective celebrations. The emotion felt during that time is chemically bound to the song through the release of dopamine and other reward-related neurotransmitters. When the song is heard again, the emotional centers are reactivated first, triggering a rush of feeling that makes the memory retrieval intensely visceral, even as cognitive memory names, dates, facts fades with age. Emotionally charged musical memories often remain remarkably intact, making music a crucial therapeutic tool for patients with Alzheimer's and other forms of dementia. Furthermore, music anticipation plays a critical role in its emotional power. The brain is constantly predicting the next note, chord, or phrase. When the music fulfills or pleasantly violates this expectation, the nucleus accumbens, a key part of the brain's reward circuitry, releases dopamine. This rewarding experience reinforces the memory of the song and the context in which it was learned. The sense of familiarity, coupled with the chemical reward, is what makes listening to beloved music a powerful mood regulator and a reliable source of comfort. The unique ability of music to evade the typical decay of memory is also partly attributed to reminiscence bumps. Psychological studies show that people tend to remember the music from their adolescence and early adulthood, ages 10 to 30, more vividly than any other period. This is a time of intense identity formation and life-defining moments. And the soundtrack of this era becomes deeply fused with the self. Consequently, these songs remain highly potent memory triggers throughout the lifespan. Music, therefore, is an architectural tool used by the brain to structure our emotional past, making the sounds we love indelible markers of who we were and where we came from. The traditional view of the mind-body connection posits that the mind dictates the body. We are happy, so we smile. We are confident, so we stand tall. However, a significant body of psychological research reveals that this causality is bidirectional. Our physical state, the way we hold our face, and the posture of our body can actively feed back into our brains, influencing our emotional state, confidence levels, and even our hormonal balance. This concept, known as embodied cognition and the facial feedback hypothesis, demonstrates that the body is not just a vessel for the mind, but a crucial component in its operating system. The facial feedback hypothesis proposes that the muscular movements required to form a facial expression directly influence the subjective experience of the corresponding emotion. The classic example is smiling, even forcing a smile, such as by holding a pen between one's teeth, which engages the zygomatic muscles used in genuine smiling, can trigger a subtle increase in positive mood and a reduction in physiological stress. The underlying mechanism is complex, but involves the brain interpreting the sensory input from the facial muscles. When the muscles associated with happiness contract, the brain receives feedback that is consistent with the state of joy, which then prompts the release of mood-enhancing neurotransmitters like serotonin and dopamine. The physical action primes the emotional state. Similarly, posture exerts a measurable chemical influence on confidence and resilience. adopting a power pose, an expansive open posture with arms spread wide. Taking up space can lead to hormonal changes. Studies have shown that even a brief period of holding an expansive posture can lead to an increase in testosterone, the hormone associated with dominance and risk-taking, and a decrease in cortisol, the stress hormone. Conversely, adopting a constricted, hunched posture, low power pose can reverse this effect, increasing cortisol and lowering testosterone, leading to feelings of anxiety and submissiveness. The physical stance, therefore, is a fast-acting lever for immediate neurochemical self-regulation. This principle of embodied cognition extends to how we process external information. The physical context of a situation can alter our judgment. For instance, people asked to hold a heavy clipboard while reading a job application will rate the applicant as more serious and important, demonstrating that the physical sensation of heaviness is being metaphorically translated into importance by the cognitive system. The body's sensory state provides a filter for the mind's interpretations. In essence, the quiet shifts in our physical presence are powerful, non-verbal commands we give to our own brains. By consciously adjusting posture or expression, we are not just masking an internal state, we are actively engineering a new one. Understanding the two-way street between body and mind empowers us to use our physical actions as a first line of defense against stress and a subtle, reliable way to boost emotional resilience and confidence in daily life. The human emotional experience is not a strictly solitary affair. It is a shared, contagious phenomenon that flows invisibly between individuals, often without a single word being spoken. The rapid transmission of states, be it stress, fear, or profound calm, is a critical aspect of social neuroscience, mediated by dedicated neural systems like mirror neurons and subtle chemical signals, known as chemosignals. This inherent capacity for emotional mirroring highlights our deep-seated evolutionary need for social synchronization. At the core of emotional contagion lies the mirror neuron system, located in the premotor cortex and inferior parietal cortex. These specialized neurons fire both when an individual performs an action and when they observe the same action being performed by another. Crucially, mirror neurons are not limited to physical actions. They also play a vital role in processing emotion. When you see someone smile or grimace in fear, your mirror neurons fire as if you were experiencing that emotion, creating an immediate, non-verbal simulation of the other person's internal state. This involuntary biological empathy is what allows a stressful atmosphere to quickly spread through a room or a single fearful face to trigger unease in a crowd. Beyond observation, emotions are transmitted chemically through chemosignals, often carried in sweat. Research has demonstrated that sweat collected from individuals experiencing intense fear, for example, watching a scary movie, contains unique volatile organic compounds. When these stress chemosignals are swabbed under the noses of unsuspecting research participants, the recipients show physiological and neurological signs of anxiety, increased heart rate, heightened skin conductance, and activation of the amygdalaven, though they are consciously unaware of the origin of the scent. This reveals a primal, subconscious communication channel. The body is literally smelling the fear of others and preparing for threat. The reverse is also true. Calm, positive emotions, and even relaxation can spread. An individual who manages to maintain calm in a crisis can act as an emotional regulator for the group. Their slow, regulated breathing and lowered heart rate provide a powerful, nonverbal cue that the mirror neuron system picks up and begins to replicate. Similarly, the sight of a trusted leader displaying confidence can trigger the release of stabilizing neurochemicals in followers, helping to mitigate the collective stress response. The contagion of emotions emphasizes the fundamental interdependence of human beings. Our nervous systems are not isolated. They are connected by an invisible biological network designed to promote coordinated survival. This capacity, while sometimes leading to collective panic, is also the foundation of human empathy, collective joy, and social learning. By understanding that we constantly transmit and receive emotional states, we gain a valuable tool: the conscious ability to choose our own internal state, not just for our benefit, but for the stabilization and emotional well-being of the entire social unit around us. The feeling of flow is one of the most sublime and powerful states of human consciousness. Coined by psychologist Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi, flow describes a mental state where an individual is completely immersed in an activity, experiencing effortless focus, profound enjoyment, and a merging of action and awareness. Time either warps, seeming to fly by in an instant, or slows down dramatically. Self-consciousness vanishes, and the task becomes its own reward. This is the optimal human experience, a state of psychological high performance that offers not just efficiency but deep, intrinsic satisfaction. To achieve flow, a delicate balance must be struck between the perceived challenge of the task and the individual's skill level. If the challenge outweighs the skill, anxiety and frustration ensues. If the skill far exceeds the challenge, boredom and apathy set in. Flow exists in the sweet spot on this continuum, where the task is demanding enough to stretch existing abilities but not so difficult as to cause discouragement. The activity must possess clear goals and immediate, unambiguous feedback, allowing the individual to constantly adjust their actions without having to pause for self-reflection or external validation. This immediate feedback loop is crucial because it eliminates cognitive clutter and allows for spontaneous, intuitive action. Neuroscience. The flow state is associated with a temporary downregulation of the prefrontal cortex (PFC), particularly the area responsible for self-monitoring and self-criticism. This phenomenon is termed transient hypofrontality. When the PFC quiets down, the inner critic falls silent. and the effortful executive function that manages inhibition and self-awareness steps aside. This allows the brain's automatic procedural processing centers, the parts responsible for learned skills, to take over. The action becomes intuitive, fluid, and automatic, which explains the feeling of effortlessness. The brain is not working less hard, it is working more efficiently. Chemically, the initiation of flow is often accompanied by a cocktail of powerful neurochemicals. Dopamine, the neurotransmitter associated with motivation, reward, and anticipation, is released as the challenge skill balance is established, driving the focus and making the continuation of the activity pleasurable. Norepinephrines also contribute, heightening sensory perception and providing a natural sense of euphoria and pain suppression. This neurochemical reward system reinforces the behavior, making individuals highly motivated to seek out activities that reliably induce the flow state, recognizing it as a peak human sensation. The benefits of intentionally cultivating flow extend far beyond transient pleasure. It is a powerful catalyst for skill acquisition and personal growth, because flow requires pushing slightly beyond one's current skill level. Repeated entry into this state automatically leads to skill development. As the individual improves, the activity that once triggered flow becomes too easy, prompting them to seek out new, more complex challenges to re-enter the zone. This continuous process creates an upward spiral of increasing complexity and mastery, which Csikszentmihalyi called the autotelic experience, an activity done not for external reward, but for the inherent satisfaction of the experience itself, in a world defined by distraction and cognitive fragmentation. The pursuit of flow is a deliberate act of seeking quality of experience over quantity of tasks. It is accessible in any domain, from a musician mastering a difficult concerto to a surgeon performing a complex operation, or even a gardener tending a challenging landscape. The key is structuring life to include activities that meet the essential criteria: a clear purpose, immediate feedback, and the precise calibration of challenge against skill. By prioritizing the experience of deep, undivided presence, we unlock our capacity for optimal performance, creative insight, and profound psychological satisfaction, transforming the mundane into the magical. The individual's experience within a social setting is a delicate, often conflicted balance between self-consciousness and social awareness. Two powerful psychological phenomena, the spotlight effect and the bystander effect, illustrate how fundamentally flawed our perception of this balance can be. The spotlight effect reveals our persistent egocentric error in overestimating how much others are noticing us, while the bystander effect exposes a critical failure in collective responsibility when we assume others are watching and acting instead of us. Together, they form a compelling picture of social miscalculation, the illusion of the spotlight. The spotlight effect is the tendency to believe that we are being noticed and evaluated far more closely than we actually are. If you walk into a crowded room with a stain on your shirt, you might feel overwhelming self-consciousness, certain that every eye is fixed on the imperfection. Yet, controlled studies consistently show that the majority of onlookers fail to notice or quickly forget minor deviations from the norm. Our sense of being under a bright, constant spotlight is a cognitive illusion stemming from the human mind's default state of egocentrism. Because we are necessarily the constant center of our own universe, we dedicate an immense amount of cognitive energy to processing our own actions, thoughts, and appearances. We mistake the intensity of our internal self-focus for the intensity of external focus. This error is compounded by the anchoring heuristic. Our self-awareness acts as a powerful anchor, and we fail to adequately adjust our perception outward to recognize that everyone else is similarly anchored in their own concerns. The truth is that most people, like us, are preoccupied with their own internal narrative, their own challenges, and their own impression management. The attention resources they dedicate to us are minimal and fleeting. The spotlight effect is driven by the desire for self-verification and social acceptance. We are acutely attuned to social cues because, evolutionarily, being seen and accepted by the group was essential for survival. The anxiety generated by the spotlight illusion serves as a hypervigilance mechanism, prompting us to constantly check our behavior. However, the cognitive cost is high. Persistent anxiety, social awkwardness, and the inhibition of spontaneous behavior. Recognizing the illusion, understanding that the intensity of the light is internally generated is the first step toward reducing social anxiety and fostering greater confidence in public settings. The knowledge that others are likely not noticing that small mistake is, ironically, a powerful tool for liberation. The silence of the crowd, diffusion of responsibility. In stark contrast to the heightened self-awareness of the spotlight effect is the bystander effect. A chilling phenomenon where individuals are less likely to offer help in an emergency when other people are present. This counterintuitive finding highlights the dark side of collective human psychology, where the presence of a crowd actively diffuses the responsibility for action. The effect operates through a multi-step cognitive process. First, there is pluralistic ignorance. In an ambiguous emergency, people look to the reactions of others to define the situation. If everyone else is calm and unsure how to react, an individual assumes the situation is not, in fact, an emergency. Second, and most critically, is the diffusion of responsibility. When there is only one witness, the burden of action rests solely on that person. As the number of witnesses increases, the perceived obligation to intervene is mathematically divided among the group. Each individual concludes, someone else will surely call for help, or someone else is better qualified to handle this. The result is a paralysis of action, often with tragic consequences. Studies show a strong correlation. The greater the number of bystanders, the lower the probability that any single person will intervene. and the longer the delay before help is offered. The lack of individual accountability inherent in the group setting overrides basic moral and altruistic impulses. The remedy for the bystander effect is to intentionally break the ambiguity and break the diffusion. If you are a victim in an emergency, the most effective strategy is to counteract the effects by eliminating the cognitive escape routes for the bystanders. This involves making direct, unambiguous eye contact with a single individual, pointing at them, and assigning a specific task, such as, "You, in the blue jacket. Call 911 now." By singling out an individual, you force the responsibility back onto one person, breaking the diffusion and overriding the pluralistic ignorance, thus demanding the focused attention that the crowd's self-preoccupation would otherwise prevent. The relationship between the spotlight and bystander effects reveals a fundamental social paradox. While we constantly worry that we are the center of attention, spotlight, the truth is that others are often too self-focused to notice our need, leading to a collective failure to act bystander. Mastering social intelligence requires understanding these two biases, reducing the anxiety from the one while actively combating the inaction caused by the other.